Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, the latest from the annual Air Force Association Conference in Washington. Defense News' Daniel Woolfolk was on the ground to check out the latest tech. Plus, the Army's search for an improved optic and targeting system as it designs its next-generation weapon. Our team looks at a pair of designs. Also, the latest headlines from around the military and defense industry. And the Military Times team of editors digs into the big issues of the week in our latest Reporters Roundtable. It's the latest news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon. This is Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. There's a lot happening in the military and defense worlds this week, so let's dive right in. The annual Air Force Association Conference in Washington, D.C. is a showcase for what's coming up for the force and a look at upcoming tech and investment priorities. Defense News' Daniel Woolfolk was on the ground to check out the latest tech.
The 2021 Air Force Association Aerospace and Cyber Conference is going on in person this year with very strict COVID protocols. This is staying on for me. Lots of tech and lots of attendance here on the show floor. Let's see what we can find. It wouldn't be AFA without any aircraft, and here's an interesting one. It's a TH-119. Leonardo currently has a contract with the Navy for 130 birds. These are for training. So if the Navy has these, why is the Air Force looking at them? Well, the Air Force is looking to streamline its onboarding process for pilots and getting them flying rotor wing aircraft from day one. And Leonardo says the TH-119 is the one they should be looking at. Now let's go see what's up in space. If you ever try to sneak in on a phone call without your parents or significant other watching, you're not alone. The DoD has the exact same problem and Parsons has a solution. I'm here with Joel Rousey from Parsons. What are we looking at?
So this is Integrated Solutions for Situational Awareness, or ISSA. This is a government-owned, DoD-produced product that's been around for almost 30 years. That produces both space domain awareness types of visualization, as well as analysis tools that are used across the entire Department of Defense and actually the entire United States government. Within this suite of tools, you can do things like visualize where various satellites are across the various orbital regimes. You can do collision avoidance predictions around individual satellites, like the International Space Station, or like you were alluding to, you can also do predictive analysis to let you know when somebody's satellite could either see or hear you any place on the Earth, and then let you decide what you want to do about that kind of information.
So you might just let it pass, or you might say it's not that much of a threat. We can have our call?
Absolutely. You can do whatever it is that you want to do with that information. If it's not that much of a threat, then you can continue doing your operations. If it is something you're concerned about, you may want to move operations that you're doing to a time when you are not being collected upon.
What kind of clients are you looking at with this?
Yeah, so right now, again, we have over 5,000 active users of our web-based version of the tool, who span the entire Department of Defense, as well as lots of other civil agencies as well. We are actively working to make this tool also available to partner nations in the future. One of the reasons why we're here is to also expand the knowledge of the awareness of this tool and its capabilities to the entire governmental network as well, because it's always been held in the classified realm. It's not as well known, and so now that we have an unclassified version, we just want to make it more clear to people of the broad usability of the tool to both space users as well as the air community and others.
That's a lot of information on there. Easy way to get it, looks like. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The Marine Corps has had the V-22 Osprey for years for its vertical takeoff and landing systems, and Bell just unveiled the high-speed VTOL, which is a system with 3 different aircraft: the heavy, the medium, and the light. The light is completely unmanned, but it can actually pick up a person on a rescue mission as well as several other types of missions. The heavy, that's a logistics aircraft that can carry troops and big pallets. small businesses are making a big impact at AFA, and Torrey Pines Logic is one of them, and their communications equipment are pretty interesting. So this is the L1. It will talk to somebody visually, much like our remote control. So right now you're not really hearing me through the L1. Graham behind the camera's got his own L1. I point it right at him.
And you're going to hear me a lot more clear.
And now that we're on the ground, let's see what kind of networks we can find. If you're in the Air Force, you may have found yourself in an austere environment once or twice, and without a cell signal. AT&T's been providing cell signals in disaster zones domestically. With this aircraft, it sends out an LTE or a 5G signal. If you got a signal, you need a device. And one they've got right here is our friend Fido, who can follow ground pounders around and be mounted with a ton of really any type of sensors. Reporting from National Harbor at the AFA conference, I'm Daniel Woolfolk.
When we come back, the latest from around the military and the targeting tech the Army wants to put on its next generation weapons.
The military and defense market is constantly evolving. Stay on top of the latest news with Sightline Media Group's live events. Continue to learn, understand new tools and technologies.
We're live. You're on in 3.
Defense, government, and industry leaders come together for successful and proven engaging events. You'll gain valuable insight, get the chance to ask questions, all from the comfort of your own home or office. Sign up for our events newsletters and receive alerts for upcoming live streams.
Welcome back. First up for your military headlines, tens of thousands of LGBT veterans forced from the military for sexual orientation will be able to receive full VA benefits under a new announcement from the department. Veterans Affairs officials announced that gay service members given other than honorable discharges will have their cases reviewed, and in most cases be granted full benefits unless other serious offenses are found. The change comes on the 10th anniversary to the repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, and also includes troops who face discrimination prior to its implementation. Over in the Marine Corps, 4 Marine Raiders received a Bronze Star with a V device for actions in a 7-hour firefight in northern Iraq in 2020. Another Marine received a Navy Cross. The honors came out of an intense battle when the force was on the hunt for ISIS fighters. 2 Marines were killed and a French Special Forces operator was wounded in the fight. The all-day battle was so intense that a staff sergeant eventually was forced to take over because all other leaders were wounded. Turning to the Navy, a deep-sea search is underway for the remains of 5 sailors killed in a helicopter crash on August 31st off the coast of Southern California. A ship with specialized equipment embarked recently to find and retrieve the sailors in the helicopter, a Navy MH-60S, which crashed while trying to land on the carrier Abraham Lincoln. The wreckage is believed to be in 4,000 to 6,000 feet of water. Now to the Space Force. Want to look at the new insignia enlisted Guardians will soon wear on their sleeves? Here you go. The insignia features the Force's Delta inside a 6-sided border with increasing complexity as Guardians rise through the ranks. Sure, looks pretty cool. The Force also revealed a prototype service dress uniform at the Air Force Association event last week. The uniforms feature the Force's dark blue color and a diagonal set of silver buttons. Finally, as the Army looks to field a next-generation squad weapon, it's also looking at high-tech ways to get more rounds on target with smarter optics. Todd South brings us more on the advanced tech now in development.
The Army is still working on its next generation squad weapon, basically the replacement for the M4 and the M16. New caliber, new ranges, new capabilities. That's still at least a year away from getting to soldiers. In the meantime, they're also selecting the fire control, basically the optic for that. And 2 different companies are competing for that contract, Vortex Optics and L3 Harris. essentially what the new scope is going to do is give some augmentation for aiming. It's going to pretty much walk you on target the way systems might have done in, say, an Abrams or a Stryker. It'll take into account environmental situations and conditions such as humidity, ballistics information from different rounds and distances you have to shoot from, and it'll also in the future link into the integrated visual augmentation system, or the new kind of do-it-all goggle that soldiers will use, and that way you can tie in the goggle to the sight and the two can talk together. And there's a new software program called Rapid Target Acquisition, which essentially will find targets that look like what you're trying to be shooting at, whether it's through dust or other types of obscurant, different types of conditions, and be able to lock that weapon onto that target almost like a fighter pilot does with his missiles. So this new fire control is essentially going to be selected down in the next couple weeks, sometime in the fall. That will then go on to the weapon. The weapon is set to field, or at least get to soldiers, by 2022. So this new scope far outdoes the old ACOGs and of course the old iron sights that a lot of older soldiers and Marines had to deal with, and gives pretty much next generation advanced type futuristic optics and targeting for even the average soldier, average grunt out there with their new weapon. Now, for a long time, a lot of these capabilities existed in different platforms. You had a rangefinder to find the distance. You had ways of measuring or using ballistic computers in a kind of a heavier, more range setting to figure out kind of where your bullet was falling on the target. But what they're trying to do is take all these technologies that existed in multiple devices and put them down into one small package. Now, the science is there. I mean, there are sensors to do that. It's just an expensive proposition. Getting these things together in the right kind of price and the right kind of ability, and also making it rugged and durable for soldiers and Marines is key. And that's really been some of the hurdles in recent years. But a lot of funding behind this Army project and how it's going to tie into the next generation squad weapon have really pushed that ball forward, and we're seeing some real big advances in optics in just the last couple of years. So the Army has really been looking at this program for a number of years, but just earlier this year, in early 2021, 115 prototypes from these two companies went to the Army for further evaluation and testing. Soldiers have used them, soldiers have tested them and given their feedback. They're going to select one of the two prototypes to move forward with this fall. And essentially what that's going to do is allow that optic to be fielded with the new weapon sometime in 2022, first to special operations and frontline soldiers, infantry, close combat forces. It's probably not going to flow to the rest of the Army or the Marine Corps for many years, but initially those frontline soldiers and Marines will have that optic on their weapon as soon as next year or shortly afterward.
Thanks, Todd. When we come back, Jeanette Mack talks about building a savings strategy for your business. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack talks about building a savings backstop for your business.
You've heard it before, and I'll say it again. Save, save, save. It's not just the smart thing to do. It could literally save the day when you're in an unexpected financial crunch. If you're a small business owner, it's even more important to have emergency savings for your business as well. Your business and livelihood might depend on it. Unpredicted dips in sales or unplanned business needs can and will happen. So every business owner should be carving out funds specifically for savings after you've taken care of daily operational expenses. To make sure you're getting the most for your business dollars, open a business savings account. When looking for the right account, compare interest rates to make sure you're getting the highest returns on your money. The next step is determining how much should be in your account at all times to cover emergencies. A good rule of thumb is to maintain at least 3 months of operating expenses in your cash reserve. But more is always better if you can manage it. If you have to work your way up to it, set up automatic deposits to your business savings account monthly until you reach your goal. And remember, no amount is too small to save. Every penny counts. When business is good, use the opportunity to save even more money. Before you know it, your business will be ready for the ups and the downs.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next time. Until then, for more of our coverage on the defense industry and all branches of the military, be sure to check us out online at Army, Navy, Air Force, and MarineCorpsTimes.com and DefenseNews.com. And if you want to start your day with the latest headlines in your inbox each morning, sign up for our Early Bird Brief. And make sure to give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And when we come back, the Military Times team of reporters and editors breaks down this week's top stories. Welcome back. When it comes to giving insight on the top news around the military, there's no one better out there than the Military Times team of reporters and editors. It's this week's Reporters Roundtable, looking at the latest from around the branches.
Welcome back to the Military Times Reporters Roundtable, where we bring you the inside stories behind the week's biggest headlines. I'm Leo Shane, Capitol Hill Bureau Chief for Military Times. And with me again are Megan Myers, our Pentagon Bureau Chief, and Howard Altman, our Managing Editor. Good to see both of you again. The last remaining U.S. forces in Afghanistan left the country last month, but Pentagon leaders are still facing a lot of questions about the messy withdrawal and the long-term security impact of that move. Next Tuesday, both Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley will testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee in public for the first time since that departure. And they're expected to face a lot of tough questionings about what happened and what's still left to find out. Megan, one of the biggest issues the senators plan to bring up is concerns about an airstrike that military officials had conducted right around the end of the evacuation. Pentagon initially said that had killed several ISIS fighters who were planning to attack U.S. military forces. Then they backtracked a few days ago and said it actually killed 10 civilians. What do we know about that right now, and what does all of this mean?
What we know right now is the investigation was released a few days ago, and there will be an Air Force Inspector General who will do sort of an investigation of the investigation to figure out what went wrong and whether any discipline should be handed down. But essentially, the strike appears to have been a case, quite frankly, of mistaken identity. Intelligence reports were saying look out for a white Corolla. They spotted a white Toyota Corolla outside of an ISIS compound, followed it for the rest of the day, and dropped a bomb on it, around 5 p.m. And it turns out that Corolla didn't belong to an ISIS fighter. It belonged to a non-governmental organization aid worker.
It's a real tragedy. Howard, part of the President Biden's withdrawal strategy here and his explanation for why it was safe to start bringing U.S. troops out now was that U.S. forces would be able to strike terrorist groups from far away, still be able to provide security even if they weren't physically in that area. Does this tragedy undermine that?
Well, there was a recent press conference where CENTCOM Commander Frank McKenzie was quick to point out that these over-the-horizon attacks can still take place. He was quick to point out this was an imminent threat response, and that the kind of activities that take place for taking out a leader of some terrorist organization where you establish a pattern of life over a course of time will still be able to continue. Don't forget that Monday there was a drone strike on an Al-Qaeda leader in Syria that CENTCOM said. There's some complicating factors, though. The distance from any base now that we're not in Afghanistan. And another issue that hasn't really been explored as much as it probably should be is this is sovereign airspace that the Taliban controls with their government. Will they allow U.S. aviation assets to enter that airspace? That remains to be seen, and also remains to be seen what, if any, cooperation the Chinese or Russians give to the Taliban in terms of anti-aircraft systems. So there's still a lot of questions that remain to be answered about that.
Yeah, but a lot of those are technical issues. I mean, I think what we're going to hear next week from lawmakers is really kind of the moral questions here. I mean, if we don't physically have folks on the ground, if we're not collecting intelligence the same way, how confident can we be in these strikes? And given this misstep, given this tragedy, can they have confidence that it's going to work in this way? Also, still a lot of lingering questions from senators about how many Americans and Afghan allies were left behind in the evacuation. State Department officials said that more than 130,000 individuals were taken out of the country over the course of about 4 or 5 weeks. But a few hundred American citizens still are there. An unknown number of Afghan allies are still there. This is hostile Taliban territory now. Howard, what's the latest on this?
Well, there are a number of different efforts underway to get U.S. citizens as well as Afghan allies out. Right now, it's a State Department managed operation. One of the big things they have to do is convince third-party countries to take these flights out of, right now, Mazar-e-Sharif. The Taliban want to be recognized by the State Department, so there's negotiations going back and forth. But there's still, every day I get messages from Afghanistan, help me. There are efforts underway that I really can't talk about this moment to help some of those folks. As far as the military, it's mostly a lift operation after they got out of the country. So it's still a very dangerous situation for the folks, American citizens, and those folks who helped us out.
Yeah, some DoD officials just briefed a few days ago, the senators and some congressmen about the latest on this. But one of the unifying themes I've been hearing is that since this is a State Department operation now, the military just doesn't have the answers, it doesn't have the authority to work on this. So Megan, what's the level of frustration down there? I mean, this is not the Pentagon's responsibility, but they still seem to be on the hot seat with a lot of this.
Well, yeah, that becomes the issue, is that for so many things, especially at the end of, our time in Afghanistan, everyone was looking for the Defense Department for what they were going to do about it. And they were saying, these are White House decisions to make, these are State Department decisions to make. So for now, like Howard said, lift, putting people on helicopters, putting people on planes, that's something the Defense Department can do. And they can also, lend their help essentially to organizing these missions for any sort of situational awareness about what's going on and connections, who to talk to about things. But as for the physical, movement and the, approval of people, that is not up to them.
Well, one other topic that I know you and I are going to be following next week is these allegations against General Milley that were outlined in a new book about the final days of the Trump presidency. That account was written by journalists Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, and it claims that Milley warned senior military officials that Trump was unstable and that they needed to consult with him, Milley, on any major military actions or any major military decisions. They also say in the book that Milley had behind-the-scenes phone calls with Chinese military leaders to assure them the U.S. wasn't planning any attacks or any military actions. What's been the reaction down the Pentagon at this, Megan?
So, the Office of the Secretary of Defense level, they've been a little bit hands-off with it, because, Milley speaks for himself. He has a separate office. But also because this happened before anybody who's running the Pentagon now was in office. So they don't have a lot of visibility about how it went down. The way Milley's camp has handled it is by explaining, much like he did in those meetings, explaining how these meetings work, who knows about them, who's on the call, and trying to kind of walk back this narrative that has emerged that he was undermining, the president, or he was usurping any sort of chain of command authority by calling these meetings.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of turmoil between the Joint Chiefs Chairman and Trump at the end. Obviously, a lot of turmoil within the Trump administration on a lot of levels. Howard, at least 30 members of Congress, all Republicans, have called for Milley to resign over this. Is there a chance that this costs him his job?
No, not at all. The Biden administration, Biden's not going to call for Milley to resign. Secretary of Defense Austin has also supported Milley. I don't see any chance of him being fired. At some point, he's going to retire. He's been there for a little bit under two administrations. So that, if anything happens, he may just decide to retire. But I don't believe that this is going to get him fired.
Well, he will be facing a lot of questions on this at the hearing. He's even deferred some of the things, saying he looks forward to talking about it at the hearing. So we'll be interested to see just how some of those Republicans react if he gives those same calm explanations, whether they take them or whether they don't. So, all right, look, one other item before we get going, a little bit on the lighter side. This week, the Space Force revealed a new prototype service dress uniform for their Guardians. Military community seems pretty split of whether they look more like Star Trek uniforms or Battlestar Galactica uniforms. Megan, do you think they can work some more Stormtrooper into this to balance everything out on the sci-fi fandom scale?
I think they need to walk some of that back a little bit. And honestly, the thing that has upset me the most about the uniforms is how untailored the pants are. They're awfully swishy, very parachutey. So maybe if they could just work on tightening the uniform up a little bit, it might not look so silly.
Howard, as our standard fashionista, I know you have strong opinions on the tailoring of the pants too, but do you think there's things they should prepare this uniform for deep space exploration and deep space travel that they won't be doing?
Well, the only good thing is that in space, you cannot hear people scream about buttons. And as Megan pointed out, the tailoring's pretty bad. You think with the budget they had, they could have worked on that. You get better fitting suits off the rack at Walmart. So that's a real problem.
Well, I'm looking forward to the congressional investigations into who put together the poor uniforms and how to improve them. That's all we have time for today. Thanks so much for you two for sharing your insight. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in. You can follow all of our coverage on these issues in coming weeks at militarytimes.com. We'll see you next time.
And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.